What's going on YouTube? Uberman here. Today I'm going to give you a quick, very quick introduction into things to check for when you're buying a used car. Now, I want to start out by saying that it doesn't matter how experienced of a mechanic you are. No mechanic, I don't care if you take it to a shop and you pay them a ridiculous amount of money to do the same thing we're going to do here. No shop, no mechanic can guarantee you that the internals of the motor, transmission, or any other component on a vehicle is in good shape or going to last. But some of the things you can look for will help you get an idea of what condition the components might actually be in. So that's what I'm going to try to do, is give you a quick walkthrough of things that I look for when I'm buying a car. So let's get started. One of the primary things I look for is this. Okay, this is your coolant reservoir. Some cars will have an expansion tank like this one does. Other cars will have a radiator right here in this area. It's got the cap on it over here. Most GM cars, you're going to find it on this side. A lot of Chryslers, you're going to find it on this side. But this is a very important component to check. And I want to stress, you don't want to check this when the car is hot. You really don't even want to check it when it's warm. I like the car to be nice and cold before I attempt to pull the overflow or radiator cap off. So, very simple. You give it a good bit of pressure straight down and turn it until it stops, and you'll feel a spring. You should, unless the cap is worn out. Alright, you want to look at the cap. You want to look at the bottom, and I'll tell you what you're looking for. If you see an excess amount of buildup, a little bit of buildup is normal, especially if it's an older cap. But you're going to be looking for particulates or chunks of any kind of material around this gasket or around the gasket under here. There's actually two gaskets because this is a two-portion cap. There's actually a spring that relieves pressure. Once pressure in the cooling system builds up too much, this spring collapses and it allows the excess coolant that's building up from pressure, steam in essence, to exit through this hose here. So as you can see, absolutely nothing going on here, but a very thick buildup of any material along any of these gaskets or in these little pinholes here, anywhere in the spring on the side, will tell you that somebody has used a stop leak product to either repair a leak somewhere or to try to stop something more serious like an internal head gasket failure. The next thing you want to look at when it comes to the cooling system is take a look and see where the coolant is at. We have down here, see if I can zoom in just a little bit, we have a minimum mark, and further up here, probably a lot harder to see, but we have a maximum mark. Your coolant, assuming everything is in good working order, should be somewhere between the two. It can be at the minimum, it can be at the full, it can be anywhere in between. But if you see that your coolant is too much lower than the minimum mark, that might be cause for concern. Another thing you want to do is, if you can see down inside, you want to take a look at the color and the condition of the coolant. And again, you're wanting to check for any kind of particles, anything floating around. In an older car that's got some mileage on it, this will be normal to see some things floating. Cooling systems get dirty, but you don't want it to be ridiculously dirty. And on an overflow tank like this, these plastic ones, the color of the tank itself can tell you a lot about the condition of the cooling system. If it was neglected at any point in time, you will see, instead of a nice uniform color like this, it will be really dark. Really dark. Now on GMs, they're typically a much darker color. They're almost a yellow. That's normal. But if you see, like on a lot of Chryslers, this portion of the tank doesn't actually get coolant in it. So if you see this portion over here is a really dark, nasty color, and this portion is light, then there's probably been a lot of neglect to the cooling system. The cooling system is a very important part of every vehicle, and you want to make sure that your antifreeze inside, your cap, and around this edge in here, you just want to make sure that there's nothing that looks concerning to you. You should be able to tell there's chunks and pieces of stuff all over. Probably a good idea just to stay away from that vehicle altogether. To put it back on, there's little tabs on each side, and as you can see, there's grooves here. You simply match up the tabs with the grooves, good downward pressure, turn till it stops. Next, we'll move on to power steering. Power steering is yet another important component to any vehicle that is equipped with it. A lot of cars have gone with electronic steering now. But yet again, we're going to be going over the condition of the fluid, because that can tell you a lot about the condition of the actual pump and possibly even the rack and pinion. So, you pull the cap, and what you're looking for is, again, color. You shouldn't have any thick buildup of anything in this reservoir, because even if it was leaking, stop leak for this hydraulic system does not consist of solid materials. And you're looking for a decent pink color, a reddish pink color. If you see a brown color, it's about time to do a good power steering flush. But if it's black, I would stay away from it, because you're probably going to be looking at some repairs in the future with either the rack and pinion gear or the power steering pump. Now here's another suggestion. This is your oil fill on your engine. Take it off and take a look inside and around. What you're looking for on this is any thick buildup or a really nasty gooey substance, or even a foamy substance that looks like water that's evaporating. That can be signs of a failed head gasket or a leaking head gasket. The next thing I do is I tend to look down inside. Now, without proper lighting, you're not really going to be able to see much inside of my engine, but what you're looking for in here is basically, it gives you a little bit of a glimpse inside of the motor. Again, you're looking for a lot of buildup, foaminess, just anything that doesn't look like it belongs in your engine. Alright, moving on. Come over here, make sure when you're going out to start looking at cars, you bring a lot of paper towels or mechanics rags or something. It's usually helpful to wear those nitrate gloves. I know I'm not right now, but I don't think my car has any diseases that it's going to give me, so I think we're fine. You're going to take your dipstick, and I can't do this one-handed, but it's a good idea to check your oil level. Probably can't see it very well in here, but the two things you're looking at is the oil level and the color. Oil that's in fairly good condition should be a golden brown. If it's a much darker brown, then it's probably pretty close to being due for an oil change. And if it's a black, that means the oil has been neglected for a long period of time. And, you know, it might be something you want to stay away from if somebody hasn't been taking care of changing to something as common as the oil. Then seriously, if you're not going to change your oil, what's the chances you took care of your cooling system or your power steering or your transmission? Okay, so in my opinion, checking the condition of the oil can give you a very good clue as to what the person that owns the car or owned it previously actually did. If they didn't change their oil, chances are they didn't maintain much of anything else. Now, my car, unfortunately, does not have a transmission dipstick. I have one for it, but it's a special order item from Mercedes, and it's not cheap. And for those of you that are going out and looking at Chryslers, things like the Challenger, the Charger, the 300, you're going to end up finding this in place of a dipstick. It looks like there's a dipstick there, but I assure you there's not. It says for dealer use only. This is sealed. There's nothing you can do unless you have the dipstick like I do, and you guys are probably not going to special order that just to go looking at cars. So as far as the transmission goes, for those of you that aren't looking at the cars that I listed above, or Mercedes makes the transmission for this vehicle. So obviously any Mercedes is going to have that exact same cap. You'll find a dipstick. Okay, oil is always going to be yellow, and your transmission dipstick will be red. Sometimes it's black, but 90% of the time the transmission dipstick is red. It's just another dipstick, looks just like this one. It's just got a red cap on it. That lets you know it's your transmission dipstick. You do the same thing you did with the oil. Pull it out, get your trusty napkin, and truthfully, the color you're looking at for your transmission fluid is this color. You want it to be a pink or a reddish color. Brown, again, will tell you that it's time for service to the transmission. And if it's a much darker brown to a black color, stay completely away from it. I wouldn't touch it. Absolutely not. And a lot of times, if you have the courage, you can smell the dipstick when you pull it out to get a smell for the fluid, and you will smell if the transmission is in trouble. You can smell a burnt smell to the fluid. And I can't really explain it any better than that, but you'll know when you smell it. If it's burnt, you'll understand exactly what I'm saying. Now, I'm going to go over one other thing when it comes to the power steering. I have already flushed all of my fluids have been completely redone. I don't mess around, I do everything. But some power steering fluids will be clear. So if it's a clear fluid, that's okay too. I didn't want to mislead you on that or have you freaking out later. Now, the next things to start looking for are leaks. And unfortunately, I don't know how good I'm going to be able to get in here with the camera, but you know, where your radiator hoses connect, do you see any trails leading down the engine, down your block? Just look around. Even if you don't understand cars, you know, find your big hose and just look around. Do you see any trails or any bubbling, any corrosion? You know, take a good look around the entire engine compartment. And a lot of cars have these ginormous covers, which makes it really difficult to see. But thanks to this thing called gravity, if you have a leak, eventually all leaks will lead to the ground. So the next thing you can do on most cars is climb underneath and take a peek for any wetness. Now, this car has what they call a belly pan. Giant plastic cover that pretty much covers the entire underside of the car. Helps with aerodynamics, helps with sound deadening. This is a perfect example. Okay, you see this trail right here? There's a trail of white stuff leading over here where you can see at some point it was dripping on the ground. Okay, that's something to look for. But as you can see on this car, this is dry, it's not wet, so it hasn't had an issue for some time. And that honestly wasn't even something that was wrong with the car. That's when I did my coolant flush. The coolant comes out of this hose, and some of it just dripped down. And if you look on the driveway here, you'll see a spot from it. So, but anyway, you're looking for any wetness, any kind of wetness. It doesn't matter what it feels like, doesn't matter the texture. If there's wetness under here, then something is leaking, and you probably want to stay away from it. And I don't know how good this is coming out, guys, but I'm doing my best here. But, you know, look around. I've done a lot of work with the cooling system on this car to make sure that it was good to go. I don't mess around. So, you know, you're going to see some trails down my engine bay from where I've also degreased and power washed the engine and things have just dried. But as you can see, there's nothing wet under the car. Look at your suspension components. You know, I know there's not much you can do with it on the ground, but you can at least take a look at all of these bushings, like right here, the rubber parts, the rubber part right there. There's your rack and pinion bellow. Right here's your sway bar link going all the way up. You've got a torsion arm right here. Just get a good visual. You know, obviously if it's a used car, you're not expecting perfection. And you're not going to get it. No car. I mean, I've had new cars that have had to go back to the dealer because of, you know, a malfunction here and there. So it happens. But on used cars, there's going to be issues. It's just the way it is. Another important thing to look for is your tires. All right? Do they have decent tread? Now, while my tires are not new, they still have very good tread depth. And one of the things you're looking for that can tell you about suspension issues is uneven wear on the edges of your tires, okay? Now you want to look and make sure all tires have good tread, but you want to check on the edges. Do you have meat in the middle? Maybe on the inner edge, it's balding. And you can see like where rubber has actually been peeled and missing. Same thing on the outside edge. If you've got a suspension issue, check both front tires, because it's usually the front end that has an issue like this because it's from a toe angle issue. But you want to check for chafing on these inner and outer edges, and you want to check for like excess wear. Typically these grooves, which help disperse water and quiet down noise, these are channels for moisture. Typically they should be even all the way out, every one of them. If you've got wearing more on one end than the other, then you have a suspension issue, and that's something to watch out for. You can somewhat get a visual of the brakes on a lot of cars if you have rims. A lot of times you can peek in, and your brakes are going to be right here. These, let's see if I can get in here. These things right here are rotors. Alright, mine are drilled and slotted, but these metal pieces in here are your rotors. You want to look for any kind of major scoring or gouging. Brake pads, again, if you can see them, you can see mine are recessed way down inside this bracket right here. That's letting me know that it's coming time for my brakes to be done. I already knew that. I knew that when I bought the car. No big deal. That's a common maintenance item. But something else to look out for, and these are things that when you pinpoint them, you can use it as a bargaining point, okay? Now, moving down, keep in mind, guys, you're going to get a little dirty doing this, so if you don't mind getting a little bit of dirt or grease on your hands, this may not be for you. Alright, you want to look under the car, again, from about the middle. And again, you're looking for leaks. You're looking for any kind of moisture under the car, on the body, or especially if you have a serious engine leak. As you drive down the road, it will spray oil all over the underside of the car. And a lot of times, if you don't look under the car, you'll never see it. So look for any slippery, slick oil, okay? Another thing you'll look for while you're under here is excessive rust. Cars rust, they're made of metal. A little bit of rust, surface rust, that's normal. Rust on the exhaust, completely normal. It's always going to be that way. But you want to look at rust on the body and any other components under the vehicle. This is also a great time just to get a quick visual of your exhaust system and see if anything looks like it's hanging down too far, you know, not sitting where it needs to be sitting. When you're moving on to the back, you do the same thing. You've got your rotors again, okay, and again we've got your brake pads. Now you probably can't see it here because I got a lot of chrome reflecting, but it's also about time for my rear pads to be replaced. Again, check the tread depth of the tires in the back. And you also want to check for the same thing I was telling you earlier, wear on the inside and outside that's far excessive from the wear in the middle. Because a lot of times, if there was an alignment issue, they may take the tires that were on the front and move them to the back so that you don't suspect it. Some people will only check the front tires. So they're smart and they'll move them to the back to throw you off. On rear-wheel drive cars, they have a differential. Same thing with all-wheel drive cars. I'm not going to climb all the way under, so I'm going to zoom in for you here. It's really hard to see, but this big component right here is the rear differential. This is your final drive. This controls your rear wheels. Now, the same thing as with the rest of the car. You're looking for moisture, you're looking for an oily residue, and I've got a perfect example because you can see there is moisture all over the differential on this. You can see a wetness. That is actually oil, and that is not because my car has a leaking differential. Like I said, I've already done the maintenance on every part of this car, and that includes a differential flush. I did that myself, or a drain and fill. You don't flush differentials. But the reason my differential is wet is because as I was filling it, you know when it's full because oil starts pouring out of the fill hole, and that is residual oil left over from when I filled it up. So you definitely want to check for wetness, and that's what I'm talking about underneath your engine or transmission or underneath the car anywhere. You're looking for that dark residue, that oil that tells you that there is something wrong. While you're back here, it's a good time to look at your rear suspension, which is always going to be connected to to the wheel. It's all going to be right here by the wheel. Just check everything out, a quick visual. Make sure there's no broken parts, nothing hanging off, wires, anything like that. And again, a good time to just go over, look around for excessive rust and things like that, which of course this car does not have. Sorry for the shaky video, guys. This isn't an easy video to do, especially one-handed. But that's about all I can do for you. I know it's a long video, and I apologize for that, but there's a lot of things to go over when you're looking at a car. I mean, I could go on for, you know, probably a good hour on things to look over, but most people aren't going to spend that much time on one car, especially when you're out looking at a bunch of cars in a day. You can do a bounce test. A bounce test is where you basically, you can put your knee on the bumper, which this car doesn't have much of one, hand on the fender, and you bounce it. You listen for noises, pops, clunks, and you want to see how long the car bounces for. And you probably can't see, but my car's got really good front struts. When the shocks or struts are bad, you want to do this bounce test on all four corners of the car. I wish I'd done this yesterday. I actually just changed my rear shocks yesterday with KYBs, so now they're good. But when you have weak shocks or struts, when you do the bounce test, now the car won't bounce anymore, but when you do the bounce test, it'll just keep bouncing up and down a good 4 or 5 times, and that's how you know you've got worn out shocks or struts. A good tight suspension, you can do the bounce test, you can bounce it up and down, and usually as soon as you let off the car, it'll bounce maybe once or twice, and it's done. And then you know you've got a fairly decent suspension. Obviously, all the things I've shown you will help you make a good decision when buying a used car, but you know, I can't guarantee anything. Hell, I can't even guarantee, you know, anything could happen. Oil pump inside the engine could go out tomorrow. Water pump can go out without warning. There's so many parts that are required to make an engine run and a transmission shift that, you know, even with all of these tools that I use to check suspension and engine components and power steering, transmission, even with all of that knowledge, you're just not guaranteed anything, guys. So if you can get a warranty within reason, get a warranty, and all the things I mentioned. If you find any problems with the car, if you're still interested in it, point this stuff out to the dealer and use it as a bargaining chip, okay? Use this to your advantage. I'm going to leave you with just a couple more suggestions. Walk around each tire, make sure they're all the same. Falcon ZX, Falcon ZX. You want to go around and make sure the tires match. Not that that's really a huge deal, but if a person took the time to replace their tires in sets of 4, that's another sign that they probably took good care of the car. And my last tip, check the windshield wipers. Check the windshield wipers to make sure they're in good condition and they don't have the plastic or the rubber tearing or falling off. Because yet again, if somebody doesn't take the time to take care of small things like cheap windshield wipers or oil or tires, then chances are they are not the type of people that took good care of the car that you're looking at purchasing. Sorry for the interruption in the video, guys. Not sure what happened, but the video cut off right when I was at the end, and I was trying to tell you that if some of those things hadn't been addressed, probably just a best idea to stay away from the vehicle altogether. I'm going to throw in another suggestion. If the check engine light is on, or you've got anti-lock brake light, if there's any warning lights coming on, you know, you may want to stay away from it. But if you're still interested, go ahead and go to AutoZone. They will do a free diagnostic check. Doesn't cost you anything. Just drive to your nearest AutoZone, have them run the codes, and they'll be able to give you a printout with the codes and the possible causes of the codes, so that you know what you're getting into before you purchase the car. Guys, this is all there is to the video. You can look at your belt. Serpentine belt, most cars have one serpentine belt. Take a look at it, make sure it's not cracked or coming apart. But there are so many things you could do. I don't have time to go into all of that. Obviously, if you're driving down the road and the car is clunking or blowing smoke, or overheating, or if it's pulling to the left or the right, or if you hit on the brakes and it vibrates the steering wheel, or you've got grinding noises. A lot of stuff is just self-explanatory. You don't want to mess with it. I hope the video was helpful for you guys that are out there looking at purchasing a newer car, a used car. Like I said, this is great for using at a dealer or even from a private party, and any issues you find can definitely be used as a bargaining chip to help reduce the cost of the car. I guess my last suggestion would be check the book value of whatever car you're looking at. Make sure you've got the right trim level when you're entering it into Kelley Blue Book or NADA if it's a dealer. Make sure that you know the trim level. Make sure you know what options it has and the correct mileage. And sorry, a lot of times dealers will price the cars over book value, and if you don't catch it, then you just pay too much. And if you do catch it, well, most people probably don't. So check the book value. Make sure that you're getting the car for reasonable value. Fair market value is what they call it. For a dealership, use NADA, and for private party, it's usually best to use Kelley Blue Book. Again, just make sure you're not overpaying for a vehicle. As always, guys, like, comment, subscribe. Be safe out there, and Uber on.